What's up, everybody? We are back after a long off season, finally getting back to the new NFL 2023 season, talking about our survivor picks this year. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about these picks again this year and help you guys make the best survivor picks each week and get the most informed decisions so that you have the best shot at winning your leagues. Of course, don't forget to like, subscribe to the video. What do you think? The subscriptions help a lot. You're not going to want to miss any of this content, as I do think it's extremely helpful making your picks week in and week out in your survivor leagues. If you're new to watching these videos, we kind of have a set format here where I take 7 to 10 teams each week that I think people might consider for their survivor picks that week. I break down what the spread is in that game, what the money line is according to Vegas, and in addition to that, what their odds should straight up win the game is, as well as a couple of qualitative factors that I think are very important to consider in each survivor pick. That is, if the team you're picking is playing at home and if the team you're picking is playing in a divisional game. I think those are things you always need to consider. Even this early in the season, it's also crucial to consider what the schedule is in the upcoming weeks for each team that you are considering to pick. You see here that I'm looking at each of the teams I'm considering this week, looking ahead through about the first half of the season and picking out the games that I think I would potentially pick them in the Survivor League down the road. This is very important because, as you know, once you choose a team for your Survivor League, you're not able to pick that team for the rest of the season. So knowing when to stash and when to use each team is very important in the strategy of winning your Survivor League. So with that, let's get into the teams in week 1 of the NFL season and which teams I really think you may be considering, but should at least be cautious about when picking them this week. The first team there is the Seahawks. They are -4.5 at home against the Rams. As you know, if you've watched these videos before, I'm always cautious about teams that are playing divisional opponents. You know, there's always an extra intensity and added rivalry to each game that makes things a little bit more unpredictable. But on top of that, I think a lot of people are discounting the Rams for how at least decent they are. They're certainly not a playoff team, but I think people assume that because they played last year that they're a much worse football team than they are. They still have a solid defense. They still have Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp, one of the best wide receivers in the league, coming back this season. So that's going to make their offense that much more powerful. On the flip side, for the Seahawks, while I do think they have a great offense and some great weapons, especially at wide receiver, with the addition of Jackson Smith and Jigba in the draft, you guys remember they do have Geno Smith at quarterback, and one season of productivity from Geno Smith does not predict the future performance from him at the quarterback position. Now, I really hope personally that Geno Smith keeps going, takes a step up from last year, but based on the track record in his career, Geno Smith is not a top 10 above average quarterback in this league. Given all those, I think the Rams are better than people think they are. I also think the Seahawks are a little bit worse than people give them credit for. Add into the fact that it's the divisional game with a little bit extra there, I would consider taking the Seahawks a different week and not this week. Along the same lines, really almost mirroring everything I just said, is the Broncos game when they're at home against the Raiders. Again, a divisional opponent you want to stay away from and look out for. You can see here that the Broncos have the same spread as the Seahawks, -4.5, although they actually have about a 2% chance less likely to win their game. So that's something to consider too. So Vegas is saying that even though the spread's the same, it's actually a worse pick than if you were to consider the Broncos against the Seahawks. Raiders is a team that also has a lot of talent on offense, again, at wide receiver, similar to the Rams, with Davante Adams, who many consider to be the best receiver in the league, maybe outside of Justin Jefferson, and Hunter Renfrow, who's a great option in the slot and one of the league's at least top fantasy backs last year in Josh Jacobs. So and then you're bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, who's nothing flashy at quarterback, but certainly a game manager who doesn't always give the game away, although the Broncos have a pretty solid defense. So given that, the Raiders are certainly a competent team. The Broncos last year it was hard to say that about them, especially when it came to putting up points on offense. This team really struggled. They hope to get over that hump with new head coach Sean Payton. But even early on in the season, before they even play week one, their wide receiving core is already getting decimated with injuries, with Tim Patrick being out for the season, and now Jerry Jeudy getting a hamstring injury, and his status for week one is in doubt too. Given all that, again, Raiders a better team than I think people give them credit for, even with Jimmy Garoppolo, our quarterback now. The Broncos, who did not perform well last year and have not proven themselves at all, obviously this season being week one, tie that into the fact that it's a divisional game, and I tend to stay away from those, and I think you should too. Moving on, the flip side here, we got the Eagles and the Patriots. Eagles coming off a Super Bowl loss in a really great game against the Chiefs. The reason that I would stay away from the Eagles here was pretty simple. One, they're on the road, which I never like. They're playing a Bill Belichick Patriot team, where the Patriots are, no matter who they have playing at any position, are always going to be pretty competent, especially when Bill Belichick's coaching. The Eagles are a great team who are going to have plenty of opportunities down the road to take them in Survivor League, even in the near future. And on top of that, with Bill Belichick being one of the scariest coaches in the league to go against, he's had the entire offseason and tons of film to study for the Eagles and on Jalen Hurts and everyone else on this team. And he's been preparing all summer long for this game. That makes me more scared than anything as a prepared Bill Belichick. So for that reason, especially at home, I'm going to stay away from the Eagles as well. Finally, last game to proceed with caution with, last one, is the Jaguars at the Colts. And this one is incredibly easy, and you already know why if you've watched these videos before. This is a divisional game on the road. That is a cardinal sin when it comes to picking games in Survivor Leagues. Unless your back's up against a wall or unless the spread is an insanely high number, you really should never pick a game like this. So Jaguars, even against the Colts, they have a rookie quarterback that haven't looked great. This is a game that you got to stay away from just because of the pure fact it's a divisional opponent on the road. And that is where the most upsets happen in Survivor Leagues. It comes in this exact situations, traveling across the country to play your divisional opponent. Not a good spot to be in Survivor Leagues. Looking at that, we'll take a look at the best pick, which is mostly the top team I list and the team that's favored by the most points, but not always. This situation it is the Ravens at home against the Texans, who were by and large the worst football team in the NFL last year. You're seeing the Ravens being favored by 10 points. The only team on this list that's favored by more than 80% chance to win. Again, the Ravens at home, not a divisional opponent, already a good spot to be in, playing one of the worst teams in the league, who have a rookie quarterback, who don't have a lot of weapons on offense outside of Dameon Pierce at running back, and don't have a lot of talent on defense. This Texans team is about as bad as it gets last year, and they did make some really good improvements through the draft. I'll give them credit there, but it's certainly not enough to make them a playoff team, and that team certainly isn't coming together in week one. The Ravens coach, John Harbaugh, one of the longest tenured coaches in the league, outside of Bill Belichick. If there's a coach that I know is going to have his team prepared for week one, it's him, especially with the style of football that the Ravens play. They're not asking a guy like Patrick Mahomes to line up and throw the ball 50 times a game. This is just about as run-heavy team in the NFL as it gets, especially given the rushing capabilities of their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. I love this Ravens pick here for the Survivor League. I think they decimate the Texans in this game, and I think it truly is the best pick. Now, if you're looking to find some good value in Survivor in week one, maybe keep the Ravens for a pick down the road. I think you'll be hard pressed to find a better pick than the Commanders at home week one. This is probably going to be a theme with most of the teams that the Cardinals play, as the Cardinals are probably the worst team in football this year and the only team in football that is not favored to win as of right now in any single game this season. It's not often you're going to get a Commanders team or any team with a rookie quarterback favored by 7 points in the first game of the season, but that's exactly what's happening. That's because the Cardinals are, one, very devoid of talent right now, especially with their star quarterback Kyler Murray out with an ACL tear from last year. you're not going to find better value. If you look at this chart that I put up earlier, Washington is the only team here that I did not identify with maybe another potential survivor pick later in the season. They're on the road a lot against pretty solid football teams, all teams that have either made the playoffs last year or have an outside chance to make the playoffs, or when they're at home, they're against a bunch of tough teams in the Bears, who I don't think Washington will be favored enough against the Bears, if at all, where you would consider them for a survivor pick. There's certainly no better value on this list than the Commanders. I doubt they're favored at -7 again many times, if at all, the rest of the season. And then take a look at the other picks. You got the Chiefs and Vikings, where if you want to look at my other chart that I just showed in the picks for the schedule the rest of the season, or at least till week 10, there's not a ton of games here that I identify through week 10 that you would take either of these teams. A lot of times these guys are either on the road playing mediocre opponents or at home against playoff contenders. So those are reasons to stay away always. You're trying to find the most disparity in each matchup here. I do like both these picks, but you can see that despite the same spread, Vegas believes that the Chiefs are slightly more likely to win against the Lions, who I think is a playoff team this year. Although this is the Chiefs at home in week 1, it's a pretty solid game. The Vikings, I think they're going to have a really tough schedule this year based on their first place finish in the NFC North last year. They're not going to get a ton of weak opponents like the Buccaneers, who are starting Baker Mayfield and, have struggled lately now with injuries last year and now Tom Brady's retirement. So that might be a good spot to take the Vikings here. Again, I do think the Ravens is the best pick and likely the pick that I go with. I think if you're not going to go with the Ravens, you should be picking the Commanders, and that's really the only two you should really consider at this time, pending, barring injury to any player in training camp or any preseason game. So with that, I hope you appreciate the video. I'll try to keep them shorter as the season goes on, but I wanted to kind of give a brief introduction and rundown of how these videos work. But best of luck in week 1, and let's hope we all make it to week 2 in the Survivor League. Thanks, guys.